Chapter 3 The Anointing. As the world came back into focus and the dizziness subsided, Michael quickly realized that they weren't in the same place. They were standing in a small entry area, illuminated by strange cone lights. Just beyond the entry there was a love seat, couch, and a flowered chair like you might find in an antique shop. Beyond this section was a sprawling open space with a gigantic white couch. The couch sections formed a complete circle with periodic openings, and sitting in the center was a single large chair covered in ornately decorated gold fabric. Michael saw several closed doors in the back of the spacious room. That was crazy. How did we get here? Are we at the Destination 2 safe house? His mom's mouth was gaping, and she was staring around at their new surroundings. I don't know. I just felt really strange all of a sudden, and then everything got super bright, and then we were here. So she hadn't seen the golden bird or the dome. Interesting. But how did a little bird bring them miles away to here? Michael thought about what he could tell her and said, I can't really tell you all that I know, but what I can tell you is that we should keep the whole teleportation thing a secret for now. I promise I'll tell you as soon as I have permission. His mom had a shocked expression. Permission? Permission from whom? I don't like secrets, Michael. Well, for someone that doesn't like secrets, you sure kept a lot from me over the years. She lowered her head, and Michael said, I'm sorry. That was a low blow. You were doing what you thought was best for me. Just trust me on this one, please. I'll tell you more as soon as I can. She nodded. I understand. I think it's just hard for me to come to terms with how fast you're growing up. Slow down, little man. Michael smiled and shrugged. He saw something out of the corner of his eye, pointed to it, and said, Isn't that a ham radio? Shouldn't we call Peter and let him know we're here? I need to try out that couch. That thing looks comfy. Great idea. He'll be anxious to find out what's going on. By the way, sorry for yelling at you back there. I was just so worried we were going to get caught. I still can't believe we were teleported here somehow. How is that even possible? I know, it's all so unbelievable. Don't worry about yelling. We were both freaking out. It's on me. I should have held on to that paper or just left it in the room when I went to check on the door. She pulled the Destination 2 paper from the secret compartment and walked over to the radio, made some adjustments on a few of the buttons and knobs, and had Peter on the other end within minutes. Peter's voice was sharp and lively. He sounded like he was a motivational speaker type guy. The conversation sounded tinny through the radio speaker. Peter advised them to stay put and get comfortable, and that he would be there in the morning. He also told them that they must not make contact with anyone. He was sad to hear about Michael's dad, and promised to do everything within his power to get him back. There was a softness in his voice when he spoke of him, and Michael wondered what, from their experiences in the military, had brought them so close. He asked to speak with Michael, and when Michael addressed him, he said, Hello, Michael. I look forward to meeting you. Your father has told me a great deal about you. Whatever happens tonight, you must know that all things will be made clear. Your life will soon change in ways that I can't explain. The statement surprised Michael, and he asked, What's going to happen? What do you know, Peter? There was a pause, as if he were contemplating his answer, and his calm voice said, What I know is that I will lay down my life, if necessary, to protect you and your family. You will learn more later. Now try to get some rest. Tomorrow will be a life-changing day for you. I'll see you both first thing in the morning. Over and out. The abrupt disconnection left Michael thinking about what he had said. Why did Peter mention tomorrow? Did he know about the anointing? Is that what his dad had meant when he said, Trust Peter, he knows? Back at the house? What was so special about this anointing event anyway? They cooked up some food that they found in a small freezer and chatted for a while, their conversation steering away from anything remotely related to their current situation. Eventually they found bedrooms in the back, and his mom insisted that he sleep in the same room with her, so they picked one of the larger rooms, which had 2 beds. She took the smaller of the 2 since she was several inches shorter, and it wasn't long before she was off in dreamland. As tired as he was, and as much as he tried, Michael couldn't fall asleep. He found himself looking around at everything in the quaint room. There was a dying plant on one of the nightstands with drooping limbs and browning leaves. Right next to it was a hollow frame with a crisp 3D projected image of him and his mom and dad from a recent trip to Disneyland. His mom must have packed it for the trip. He couldn't believe how much he towered over them now. When his mother had measured him recently, he was up to 6 feet 1 inch. Now that he knew he was adopted, all of the differences between him and his parents seemed to stand out more. His hair was light brown, whereas both of them had dark hair. He had more of a pointed chin, whereas theirs were wider, his mom's more rounded. He laid back and noticed more of the unusual cone lights, but this time they were in the form of a chandelier, and he wondered again what they were. Their soft light seemed to hypnotize him, and he finally drifted off to sleep. Michael was breathing heavily as he raced to escape the groping clawed hands thrashing after him. He was having the same nightmare from the night before. The terrifying dragon creature was chasing him. It stood on 2 legs like a man, but it had a dragon's head with a short snout. It was wearing a black uniform with thicker dark gray sections on the chest, arms, and legs. There was an insignia of a dragon blowing black flames on the monster's upper chest, near his left shoulder. Michael turned back and saw an enormous cave entrance on the mountain ahead. There was a wall of peculiar gold light over the massive doorway of the cave, and he could feel the light beckoning him as if it were a safe haven. Hearing a blood-curdling screech behind him, he turned and saw the yellow, black-slitted eyes of the towering dragon figure. The imposing creature's long claws slashed at him just inches from his back. The sight sent shivers through his body, and he lunged forward. Then, right as he was about to slip into the monster's grasp, the curtain of gold-flecked light swallowed him up. He shot up off his pillow, his pulse racing. The dream had seemed so real. Maybe it was the fact that he had seen those eyes again. It took a few minutes for him to gain his composure. Was there some message or foretelling embedded in it? He knew from his studies that every dream had certain symbolic representations, often taken from the dreamer's subconscious. He heard a faint ticking sound coming from the ornately carved grandfather clock on the wall, and he gasped when he saw that it was 11:58. Was this anointing event going to happen at the stroke of midnight? His heart raced, and he began to count the seconds. 2 minutes had never passed so slowly. His heart rate grew as the seconds ticked by. Shortly after the clock struck 12, his mom sat up, her eyes wide open, and said, "What? What am I supposed to see?" A shaft of white light, filled with tiny red particles, shot through the ceiling and slowly descended toward Michael. It reminded him of the unique glow of the bird and the door from his dream. It resembled a beam of dust particle-filled light shining through a window. He felt drawn to it, stood up, and raised his right hand to touch it. The tiny flecks seemed to come alive. As they flooded into his outstretched hand, waves of joy lapped over him, and he wished he could stay in that state forever. The positive energy within surged and pulsed, and the speckled light drifted out from his hands and chest, lighting up the room, accompanied by a high humming sound. Michael stared in awe at the incredible scene around him. Every object in the room, including his mom's bed with her on it, was floating 2 to 3 feet off the ground. Her eyes were full of tears, and she said, "This is so incredible, Michael. What are you feeling right now?" Michael tried to think how to put it into words and said, "I don't know. I feel full of happiness and energy, like I could leap up and fly. I can't describe it." With a huge smile on her face, she clapped her hands together and said, "I feel some of that too. It's amazing. In my dream tonight, I saw a glowing man, and he told me to wake up as there was something that I needed to witness. I see what it was now, and I wouldn't have missed it for the world." Her eyes drooped for a second before she said, "I just wish your father could have been here to experience it." "I know, Mom. We'll get him back, whatever it takes," Michael said, trying to convince himself that it was possible. Slowly, the warm feeling in the speckled light faded, and he was left feeling exhausted. The floating items came to rest, and Michael found himself staring at the plant next to his mom's bed. It was now very alive, with thriving pink blossoms and fresh green leaves popping out from each healthy branch. His mom's eyes had followed his gaze, and she muttered, "That plant was all but dead when we laid down earlier. I remember thinking that I should water it, but I was way too tired. Look at it now. It came to life. I know, Michael replied, his head slipping down to his propped hand. What's weird is that I can feel its life force, as if it's thanking me. What he had said sounded strange coming out of his mouth, but it was the truth. His eyelids felt very heavy, and then his head dropped to his pillow, and he was out. When Michael woke up the next morning, his mind flipped on, and the previous night's activities began playing out over and over like a video set on repeat. Why had that nightmare come again? What was the significance of the mountain and the golden door? His mind went to his anointing. What was that strange red-flecked light, and why did everything in the room float? And what was it about the light that brought the plant back to life? He felt different, like he was bursting with energy, and his mind was clearer than it ever had been. A memory of the capsule came to him, and he jumped down, grabbed a fresh t-shirt from his suitcase, and took off toward the main room, nearly tripping over his mom's suitcase. He had to chill out or he was going to hurt himself. But all he could think about was getting to his mom and opening the box. He was dying to know what was in it and what the future held for him. Then a sickening thought entered his mind. What if the destiny the capsule held for him didn't include getting his father back? Part of him wanted to just bypass opening it, go and get his dad, and return to open it with him. But then he had a comforting thought. At least they had Peter to help them get him back. When he walked around the corner, his mom was cooking breakfast in the kitchen. Everything about this place was supersized, as if it had been built for large gatherings. There was no natural daylight shining through, as there were no windows. But the room seemed brighter than most. The odd, upside-down cones were providing the lighting. It didn't look like any electrical system he had ever seen, and he wondered where the light was coming from. The golden chair, an ultra-secret location. He was sure there was a great deal about this place that Peter hadn't told them. And how were Peter and the magical bird connected? His mom saw him come in and said, "There you are." She had her usual pleasant smile, but her soft eyes were puffy and red like she had been crying. "Are you hungry? Luckily I found more food in that freezer." She was pointing to the small refrigerator unit they had discovered the night before. She motioned to an enormous round wooden table in the adjoining area and said, "Have a seat. You must be starving." He felt the pronounced emptiness in his stomach and said, "I am. It's weird. It feels like I haven't eaten for days." "It may have something to do with what happened last night. That was the most amazing thing I've ever seen," she said. Her comment jogged his memory, and he said, "Which reminds me, Mom, we need to open my box right away." He thought of Peter. "What are we going to do with Peter, by the way? Dad said something about Peter knowing and that we should trust him back at the house. But what does he actually know?" "Don't worry about it, dear. Peter mentioned that things would change after today. Maybe your dad told him about your anointing. After all, like you said, your dad trusts him, and he is very leery about trusting anyone, even family." She paused and said, "One thing at a time, though, mister. Eat up. And just remember that Nimue said not to tell anyone about her or the capsule." After eating more than he had ever had in one sitting, and finally feeling full, he put his dish in the sink. But as he turned to walk away, he heard his dad's voice in his head say, "Do your part to help out, even if your mom is willing to do it for you, and take care of your responsibilities." He knew that what his dad had often said was right on. His mom would do anything for them, without hesitation, but it wasn't fair to her if they took advantage of this. With that thought, he turned back around, washed his plate, and put it in the strainer next to the sink. His mom winked at him and said, "Thanks, Bud." "You're welcome," he said, turning to sprint to his room. As he bounded across the floor, he heard his mom call out, "Okay, get the box. I know you're dying to open it." Michael rushed back to their room, trying not to trip this time. He found the box in the special compartment of the suitcase. It was made of ancient-looking rich cherry wood and was about the size of a large jewelry box. There was something strangely familiar about this mysterious artifact. What secrets did it hold? He carried it carefully out to the white couch next to the kitchen area and sat down. His mother was sitting there, waiting patiently. Now she was staring at the capsule and nodded for him to go ahead. A capsule. Why had Nimue called it a capsule? Whenever he thought of a capsule, he usually thought of a time capsule. His eyes stopped on a clear crystal inset on the top of the box, embedded in the wood. When he brushed his hand over it, he couldn't even feel it there, but he felt a surge of warmth and contentment, like the feeling the bird had brought. The ghostly magic crystal pulsed with a golden light. Something stirred inside of him. It was as if it were a long-lost prized possession. But when would he have seen it, and why didn't he remember? There were 2 clicks, and the capsule lit up. Michael noticed that the beaming outline had light gold, almost yellow specks swimming around in it, instead of the white light with red specks from last night. Then it hit him. This was the same gold light from the bird, and from the gargantuan door in his dream. His mother gasped, "Michael, where is the capsule? It's not there anymore. Is it gone?" Michael grabbed it just to reassure himself. What had happened? Was it invisible to her like the golden bird? "It's right here, Mom. But it's surrounded by this incredible speckled light like we saw last night, but gold-colored this time. Maybe it's hidden from you somehow. I think it has something to do with the weird crystal. The box lit up when I touched it." There was now a thin, visible lip on it, and for the first time it looked like it could be opened. His mom was staring at his hands like if she stared long enough the box would appear. "Crystal? What are you talking about? Your dad and I never saw any crystal on it, and we have studied that thing for hours trying to find clues." The crystal and the light around the capsule were no longer flashing, and Michael began to notice a pattern. When he had touched it, the double click seemed to confirm that it recognized him. After that, the flashing pulse went away. He took a deep breath and said, "I'm going to try and open it now." When he touched the front near the lip, he could feel the presence of the crystal calling out to him. The capsule opened easily, and sitting inside, in a velvet slot, was a ring with a crystal in it. But this one had 6 distinct facets. In the center, the crystal jutted out to a slight point, framed in by an engraved 4-pointed star. He also spotted intricate engravings of what appeared to be a planet on either side of the overall setting. The crystal and the ring band were steadily flashing with the same strange red light he had seen during his anointing event. Michael felt drawn to this unusual artifact, and he wondered if the feeling of longing and familiarity he had noticed before was actually for the ring inside. His mom had a confused look on her soft face and said, "What is it? I don't see anything at all." So maybe the ring was invisible to her too. "It's a ring, Mom. It has a clear crystal in it with a point in the middle, and there's a line down the middle of it, almost like it's cut in half. The crystal is glowing red with that strange light from last night, and there's a star carved into it. The whole thing is flashing." His voice trailed off as he reached for it. He was in a trance. "It's beautiful." When Michael grabbed the ring, it felt like he was holding on to something made out of low-voltage charged gas. It had substance, but it wasn't a solid object, and there was a subtle sensation that reverberated into his hand from it. Then there were 2 clicks, and it glided onto his right middle finger. A strong surge traveled up his arm, and warmth filled his chest. What was happening to him? All the gold light surrounding the box shot into its embedded crystal, flashed several times, and the crystal disappeared. His mother started and said, "Oh, okay, there's the capsule. But I still don't see the ring. What happened?" Michael's eyes lit up, and he said, "Did you hear that?" "No, what was it? I feel like I'm missing everything." Her normally subdued voice was anxious. She pointed and said, "Why would the capsule reappear?" "I'm not quite sure. It's like once I touched the ring, there were these 2 clicks like the ones I heard when I touched the gold crystal on the box to open it, and then all of the gold light around the box went into its crystal. And now the crystal is gone. It just disappeared. This is all so weird." He was staring at it. Maybe the strange light is what hides things. It all felt like a dream. If this was real, what powers did this ring hold? What was he to do next? Almost as soon as the thought came to him, a voice, more like a prompting, echoed through his mind. It was telling him to touch the ring. So he reached down and touched the small, pointed face. His fingers passed right through it and touched the glowing ring band. Then a beam of the same unusual red speckled white light floated out of it and formed a lively swarm above him. He heard a high but pleasant humming sound, and the strange mist seeped through the ceiling and disappeared. The room became eerily silent, and Michael was left staring in awe at the spot where the light had vanished.